Welcome to the Lights Camera Pro podcast, where we interview entertainment pros about their careers and how they became successful in the industry. The secrets to their success here every week. Here's your host, Shawn Ventura.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Lights Camera Pro podcast. I'm your host, Shawn Ventura, and today I'm going to be talking with my good friend, Steve Daly. He's hilarious, he's fun, he's got lots of stories about Shaq and Charles and ESPN, and he's a director and a TD. Here we go. All right, so let's get started.
Sure.
Thanks for doing this, man.
Yeah, man. Anytime.
So when did you know that you wanted to be in the TV industry?
I was probably my second sophomore year, and that's serious and a joke at the same time. I just transferred from a pretty big school in Pennsylvania called Indiana University of Pennsylvania to Mansfield University. It's a very small school, 3,200 students. And,
high school or college?
College. Okay. And I always wanted to be a DJ. In high school, I wanted to be a DJ, like a radio disc jockey.
Oh, cool.
Never had any interest in sports, didn't care about it. The only sport I ever watched was baseball. The only sport I ever played was football. The only sport that I wish I could play was hockey. And I didn't watch it every day. I wasn't like an avid crazy fan, so it really didn't interest me that much in terms of, as a fan at that time as a kid. And then I got into college, and when I got to Mansfield, everybody was involved with the sports programs in some case or another, and I started play-by-play for baseball and basketball and then football.
Oh, wow.
And when I started doing that for the radio station, I was like, this is where it's at. I want to be in sports. I want to do sports. I want to do sports. It was fun. There was a start. There was an end. It was all reaction. It was all games. I loved it. And my advisor, because when I transferred from colleges, I was under crap, what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of like probation.
Okay.
Because I didn't have good grades. So they transferred all my credits, but not my grades. So I had one semester to show that I wasn't a total screw up.
Mm-hmm.
And I got this advisor, and he ended up being my mentor, really, Howard Travis from, I don't know really how to put it.
He was just kind of brought you along, because that's kind of my question too, is that usually to do play-by-play, you have to know sports really well. And you said you knew baseball, but you didn't really know hockey or football. Did you just wing it? Or
I played football, so I knew enough about it.
Okay.
Basketball, I was full bore winging it because no one else wanted to do it. No one wanted to do it. And I flat out sat down and started calling the games. And I mean, my first I wish I had these. I don't have these because I'm an idiot. Yeah. I don't save anything.
Right.
I remember the first broadcast, I was number 12, passed it to number 23. Like, that's literally how I was saying it. Right. And I got back to the meeting part, and they're like, hey, do you know any of these players? I'm like, no.
No.
And they're like, why? And I said, I don't know. And they're like, well, if you're going to broadcast, did you read the notes or anything? I said, no.
Right.
So then that in turn started the preparation. Kind of being, prepared for a game, knowing, and then I actually started doing the writing for the newspaper on the sports section, which made me go get interviews and get to know people.
Oh, cool!
Which really kind of wrapped it up for me, and then my mentor, Howard Travis, was like, dude, you're not a radio guy. And I'm like, what are you talking about? This is fantastic. This is fun. He said, no. People don't get in this business to have fun. They get in to have fun and make money. And you're not going to make money if you go on the radio side. He goes, if you go on the TV side, you're going to make some money. And I said, I don't want to be on TV. And he and we had a drink every Wednesday night at the bar, the one bar that was in town, and we talked extensively about the business. He used to teach at Montclair State in New Jersey, which was heavy involved in Emmys and local Emmys, all regional broadcasts in New York, and he had a lot of contacts and got me an interview for my internship with MSG Network in New York.
Okay.
And that's Madison Square Garden Network.
Yeah.
And he pushed me to kind of look at the TV side. He's do your internship on the TV side, and if I'm still wrong, when you graduate, you go do whatever you want. But I don't think I'm wrong. And I thought it was a bad idea because I had a lot of contacts at the radio station back at my hometown, which I thought I got 2 contacts at Clear Channel radio stations that are right around the corner from my house where my parents lived. And they're the biggest ones in town, big fish, small pond type thing.
Right.
Everybody listened to 97.1, whatever it is, the river here. Everyone listened to, 102.7 KISS FM in Williamsport. Everybody listened to it.
Okay.
And I had contacts there. I thought this is where I wanted to go, this is what I wanted to do. And he said, just trust me. And he was right. He was dead nuts on. It took me a week, and I was escorting Mark Messier to an interview place. Mark Messier is like a legendary hockey player. Yeah. I'm escorting him, and so the big names and the big faces sucked me in because I'm at a Knick game and I'm taking statistics to Marv Albert courtside at a Knick game.
Yeah.
And all you see is famous people.
Yeah. It's very cool.
You can't talk to him. You can't rub elbows with him. You can't do it. But everywhere you look, everywhere you turn, there's a famous person. And the Knicks at the time were somewhat decent. They would squeak into the playoffs and then lose. The Rangers were kind of the same drill.
Right.
But MSG Network had the Rangers, the Knicks, the Rangers, the Islanders, the Devils, the Knicks, the Nets, and the Mets all under there. So they had year-round work.
Wow. So let me just ask you real quick. So you went to school in New Jersey. It was Montclair.
No, Pennsylvania, Mansfield.
Pennsylvania. Mansfield University in Pennsylvania.
Mansfield University.
And then MSG Network was in New York City.
Yeah.
And you did an internship there, and that's where we are right now. Okay.
Yeah.
And so you're doing interviews, you're doing stats. Are you doing video yet? Is it just audio?
I'm in at MSG. It's full bore unionized, so I can't touch anything. I can't be on camera. I can't order a technician to do anything.
You can just be there and help out. Okay.
I'm essentially a runner. I'm a glorified runner as my internship. I'm getting people coffee. I'm getting statistics.
Right, but you're around everybody. You're learning.
Yeah. And that turns into a job, a freelance. I was freelance like all 8 years I was in New York. I never had a staff. I did have a staff job at one point, but my first job was freelance for MSG Network. I was doing their ticker, the bottom line ticker on everything you see now. Yep. That was manual when I started. So I would sit there, and originally it was only New York sports. So I'd just have to sit there with every game on in front of me, and if the goals changed, I had to change it on the ticker. Oh. Then they finally figured out how to automate it, which is good, but none of the notes were automated. So by putting the notes by the scores and all that stuff, that kind of transitioned into a graphic coordinator job, like the graphics PA.
Right.
And that was really my first real gig, was doing graphics on the studio show for MSG Network Sports Desk. Okay. And it was an interesting job because I could rattle off pretty much every single person I've worked for or worked with at MSG, from a PA all the way up to the executive producers when I first started. And that was still the time where you could still smoke in the building. Okay. You could curse and swear at somebody and call them a piece of crap or whatever.
Right.
And not get in trouble. Right. Like when you heard someone going to HR, that meant they were getting fired. Like that's how crazy it was. Right. And no one ever went. Like that was the point. Like I left MSG, not left it, but like I got another offer to do college football with ESPN. So I was there for a year and a half. Okay. Just doing their sports desk and logging games and that kind of stuff and just doing graphics. And I got a random ask from a friend of a friend of a friend if I could do graphics for an entertainment show for ESPN. It was up on the Upper West Side.
Cool.
And taping started at 4 a.m. And I was like, all right, do whatever you want. So I'm walking up the West Side at 3:30 in the morning with all the hookers and people leaving the bars. And it ended up being Dream Job, the ESPN show where they had all the people.
What was the show? Could you say the show?
Yeah, Dream Job. It was
Dream Job.
Called,
Your Dream Job.
It was called Dream Job.
Okay.
It was great. It was awesome. It was a great experience. Every experience I've had has been like a keyhole perfect experience I needed.
Okay.
That was exactly what I needed. Everything is what I needed to get to where I am.
So let's just keep going. Do you feel like you've been lucky in your career, like in the beginning or all throughout?
I would say if I could put a percentage on it, I would say, my years in New York, I don't feel like we're lucky. I feel
just
like
hard work?
I earned that.
Okay.
I straight up earned that.
Okay.
I showed up when I went. I didn't tell you this story. When my internship was over, there was the vice president of production at the time, and I never really saw eye to eye. Didn't really get along. I was a runner for the Devils, and the Devils wanted me to be their graphic coordinator, and he trumped that quickly. No pun intended. He just shut it down. And he got one, and it was like a request from the producer wanted me, the director wanted me, the talent wanted me, but he said no. And when the question of why was anyway, so I decided to go freelance, and the producer of Sports Desk says I need loggers, and I was like, great. And he's like, but for some reason they won't let me hire you. Okay. And this is not a staff position, just freelance, like $100 a day. Like, I need a guy who can log, and I'm like, yeah, I'll do it. And he's like, for some reason they won't let me hire you. So the next day I showed up at the building dressed like I would for an internship, with slacks on, a collared shirt, nice shoes, with my little brown bag my parents got me to put my not real computer in. And I walked in, and my badge still worked. And the security guard at the employee entrance, Joe, hey, Steve-O, how you doing? I've been talking to the guy for 5 months at this point.
Yeah.
And I walked upstairs, and I walked in, and Dave Patterson, who was the producer at the time, he's now with MLB Productions. I think he's president or vice president of MLB Productions. He said, what are you doing here? And I said, I'm here to log. He goes, I can't hire you. I said, that's fine. And I did it for free for about a week. And I think he or someone else said, what's he doing here? Someone said to him or somebody else, what's he doing here? And said, he's just showing up and working until you're going to pay him. And so they finally paid me. So I worked for about a week for free. I lived with my grandmother at the time, so I didn't have any bills.
So were you commuting from Jersey?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I was in Bergen County, Jersey. I took the bus in every day.
Wow. What was that, like an hour commute, hour and a half?
45 minutes if there's no traffic. And when there is traffic, which there kind of always was, at the worst part, it'd be in 90 minutes.
Right.
If you were on a day shift, if you were an intern and you were on a day shift and they had to be there by 9, I'm leaving the house at 7.
Wow.
It was ridiculous. But I rarely was. I'd have to be there by crew call, which is usually like 1 o'clock, which wasn't terrible. But it was like stuff like that. Like, I don't believe my time in New York was never luck. I worked my ass off. I showed up early on purpose. I still do now. I still show up early. Mm-hmm. Like, I was sitting at my desk at 1:45 waiting to talk to you and I'm in my own house. You know what I mean? Like, it's just ingrained in my brain because I
don't
learned
like to be late either. I don't.
Yeah, I learned from friends, and there are guys that paid for my lunch and bought me dinners that knew I was struggling. I had no money because I was an intern. I was living with my grandparents and I was trying to do something, and they knew it. And they said, no, lunch is on me, or I got your dinner tonight. And they'd throw me $20 and say, dinner's on me tonight. And because they knew what I was doing, they knew what I was trying to build.
Right.
And then once you start making a little money, I followed the rule of never say no. I didn't care who it was. I didn't care what show it was. I never said no to a show. You want me to do a high school football game in South Jersey? I'm on my way. You want me to do a high school lacrosse game out on Long Island? I'm on my way. We don't have a stats guy. We don't even know who's playing. That's fine. I'm on my way. I didn't care. I would just do it. My roommate, one of my roommates later in life, but he was one of the guys that always bought me lunch. He was an AD for the Devils. Great guy, Larry Gaines. Oh, I'll never forget him for the rest of my career because he was always one of those guys that bought me lunch, gave me a ride if I needed one. I was waiting for a bus. No, I'll take you. Always took care of me because he was a union AD, DGA, making tons of money, and he spread the wealth. He knew what I was going through because he did it. And
maybe you'll do that. You probably already have done that for a young guy or gal that's coming up. Yeah,
sure. I mean, that's the whole point, and that's where I learned this type of style. He and I had this contest one year, not the Seinfeld contest, a regular contest, where we wanted to see how many days in a row we could work. And we did it at the beginning of hockey and basketball season, which was our busy time because it was also high school sports, high school football, hockey and basketball were all starting going, and NFL, which we didn't really do much for NFL, but we did wraparound shows for NFL, and we had MLS. And he and I worked from the beginning of October, I think it was somewhere to the end of January without taking a day off. And that was on purpose. Like Christmas Eve, I worked till midnight. I drove home to Pennsylvania to see my parents. I woke up, I opened Christmas presents with my parents, and I left by noon so I could make a 3 p.m. call in New Jersey. And everybody was like, why would you do that? And I'm like, I just can't say no right now. Because no one wanted to work on Christmas Day. Not like there were 3 Jewish guys, not being derogatory or anything. There were 3 guys who were Jewish in the PA pool that didn't work on Christmas Day.
Right.
And they wouldn't work that day. And Dave said, I got nobody else. Are you willing to do it? I said, of course.
Yeah.
I'll do whatever you want. And that got me going to a point in my career in New York where people knew it didn't matter what the task professionally, I was going to do it.
Right.
And I was going to do it as best as I could do it. And there were plenty of times I ran into producers who were big pains in the asses who would probably say otherwise, like I was unorganized or didn't know the sport. But at the time, to start out, a lot of times I didn't. And I'd have to like learn on the fly or read a book about it, or like I didn't know anything about lacrosse. Mm-hmm. And that's something that like guys like my producers at MSG would say. They would say, stop reading the front page of the paper, start reading the back, because that was always a sports section.
Right.
And it's really what changed me. These guys instilled that work ethic in me that, I mean, my wife and I were talking about it now. Like, we were looking at the schedule and we're supposed to go on this vacation in mid-July. She's like, you're out, right? I'm like, of course I'm out. They're going to ask me to work and I'm going to do it, because if this thing is over in June, who knows what the schedule is going to look like? Who knows who's gone?
Everybody's just going to go crazy and try and do a million things. And
and
you're not going to get a vacation for 6 months a year. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's really where I learned that. And I was freelance. I was freelance for MSG Network for a while. I did that, the Dream Job show, which was such a great experience. It was an entertainment company doing this show for ESPN.
Okay.
So you had an entertainment company, guys who do game shows, guys who do non-sports events, and then you had ESPN all in the same room. And it was sometimes it was wildly insane. Like, I can't believe these people are talking to each other this way. And other times it was like absolute magic, like watching them develop something. And all I was doing was building fonts. Right. And it was a great experience. I did 2 seasons of that. And that catapulted me into ABC Sports as a permalance in New York. I did graphics for college football for 2 seasons,
okay,
and horse racing in between, which was
just a lot of experience, right? You're working in a lot of different studios and you're doing different things, but you're watching, you're learning a lot.
Tons. It was so much to absorb.
Kind of a weird question, but what did you do for health insurance during that time? You were permalance, you were freelance.
Yeah.
Did you just...
I would pay out of pocket for I would go to a lot of Doc in the Boxes and I would pay out of pocket, but I had insurance for emergency room visits. It was a weird thing. It was like $100 a month. And if I it essentially was, it was some weird insurance. It wasn't like a State Farm or anything, or like it
was like if you are in a car accident and you're about to die, they won't charge you 90 grand.
Yeah,
you only
it
have
was
to pay
literally
10 grand.
it was like there was like I remember the form because the doctor had to sign off that this was a legitimate emergency room visit, and they had to fill the thing out, and then I presented it to the insurance company, and then they pay for it.
Right.
So I didn't have any insurance from a company until I got when I got to MLB Network my first time. It was my first staff job, but when I
and were there jobs? So did you go from where you were just talking about right now to MLB Network, or were there other jobs in between?
No, so I did 2 seasons of college football, and then the ESPN takeover of ABC Sports happened, and they called me into a room and they said, the New York office is closing. We have a job offer. It's on the table. Here's the offer. You're going to be what's called a road tub PA. That wasn't the official title. It was just production assistant or broadcast assistant. But I would be essentially doing all the busy work for the PAs that are on the road.
Okay.
Getting all the video clips and building all the specialty graphics, and then packing up a road tub and then shipping it to wherever the PA was, which was not my cup of tea.
Right.
I'm like, I did a year and a half, 2 college football seasons and a horse racing season for you as a lead graphics PA. And at the time as a PA, because during the off season I would work, I worked other places. I was freelance. I'd do one-off stuff for MSG. I'd do one-off stuff for CBS, local, just a runner, just, making copies. I didn't care.
Right, everything, yeah.
Anything I could do, I would just do. And I was probably, as a PA in New York, making around $60,000 to $5,000, which was a lot of money. Mm-hmm. And they offered me to move to Bristol's full-time job for like $32 grand.
Wow.
And I'm like, I can't do that. I'm like, and they're like, oh, well, it's not New York. I'm like, that's my point. I'm like, I go to New York every day. You're asking me to go to Connecticut? Like, I got season tickets to the Yankees. I'm like, this is my life down here.
Yeah.
Like, I can easily do what I do now without having to go to Connecticut. And they're like, well, it won't be for us. And I said, okay, thanks a lot. And the guy said, this is a career changer. I said, you're right, it is. And it ended up, and I hand to God, Shawn, what I'm about to tell you is true. This is where some of the luck comes in.
Yeah.
I pack up my desk. Now I'm permalance, so they're paying me, but I'm not staff.
Right.
So it was easy for them to cut ties. So I pack up my desk in my box. I go down the escalator. I open the door on 62nd Street, and there's the producer for the New York Rangers when I was an intern for MSG. I go down the escalator, and I walk out the door, 62nd Street, and the producer for the New York Rangers from MSG is walking up the thing. He used to call me Pinto.
Right.
And hey, Pinto. I'm like, Joe, what? His name is Joe Whalen. Hey, what's up, Joe? What are you up to? And he's like, nothing, just taking a walk. What are you up to? And I said, I just got canned, I guess. And he said, no kidding. He said, are you serious? You got nothing going on right now? I said, I have nothing going on right now. He goes, I need a graphic PA to finish the season with. This is like in December or January.
Yeah.
So he needs someone to finish up it was later than that. So it would have been January, February. It would have been either February or March. It was like February, I think.
Yeah.
Because he needed someone to finish the last 33 games of the season for the Rangers. And I was like, okay, I'm your guy.
Lucky. Very lucky.
So I walk back into that office. I see all the people I used to know. Everything's, normal. And They hire me. It's a great rate for a PA. It was like $300 or something. I can't remember what the rate was. I ended up making good money. When you're on a crew like that, it's the announcers. It's just like now. It's the producer, director, AD, and graphic coordinator with the announcers, both radio and TV, all travel together. And it was a great experience. But Joe was really intense inside the truck. And I mean, like, in a really, really bad negative way. And I love the guy. I really did. But he really stresses you out when you're inside the truck. Okay. And I came to a turning point at that time, and I realized that I can't put myself in that situation because I beat myself up, because I stress out away from the job. And at the end of the season, I told him I wasn't going to come back. He said, "What are you talking about? You're not going to come back? It's the New York Rangers," which I've hated the New York Rangers my whole life, by the way. And I said, "Yeah, no, I know, Joe, but I don't think it's a good idea because I don't think you and I work well together." And there's just this dead silence. And he's like, "Listen, man, I know I yell in the truck." I'm like, "It's not that. It's not the yelling. I can take yelling. I can't take the constant badgering after that, you know?" Mm-hmm. So, and like I said, he was a good dude. He's still working. I think he's with Columbus now. He and I just didn't get along in that sense inside the truck. Outside the truck, we were fine. Inside the truck, we were not, you know? And again, I tell him I can't do it. And they said the graphic coordinator for the Islanders takes the job from the Rangers. So now the Islanders graphic job is open, so they offer it to me. So I'm right back into the fold. Right. I have a job. I do 82 games with the Islanders. My producer, director, and AD are three of the greatest people I've ever known. They was like a family. Right. We weren't going out and getting hammered because the producer didn't drink, the AD didn't drink, the director was a really nice guy. He and I every now and again would have a cocktail, but it wasn't like it was the healthiest 2 years of my career.
Really?
Yeah, and it was fun. The Islanders were dead last 2 years in a row. They were rebuilding. No one from the office cared, but we did, you know, right. And we put everything we could into the two shows. And this is around 2006, 2007, 2008, because MLB Network was starting. And I took a job, my first staff job with MLB Network. Dave Patterson was one of the EPs, vice president of productions at the time. Mike Santini was senior coordinating producer at the time. I think he's now with Marquee. Mike Santini is, and Dave Patterson is like big wig with MLB Productions in Secaucus. And so I got the job there. At the same time, previous to that, I met my now wife, and she was working in New York and living in New York. And I thought, this is great. Everything's fine. Started my new career with MLB Network. I was there for 1 year. Mm-hmm. And my wife said, "I want to move to Atlanta." And I'm like, "Get the hell out of here. Just got a staff job for the first time. You want to move to Atlanta now?" And I said, "I'm not going to move without a job." And I knew the Braves were playing the Mets. So I called a friend of mine from MLB Network, called a guy, not a friend of mine, my boss, John Entz, the big boss. Right. Called his friend at Fox Sports South in Atlanta, just gave them a heads up that I was looking for a job. I was still a graphics PA at the time, looking to kind of move up and into the AD world. I'd been a graphic PA for almost 6 years at that point, almost 7 years. Right. And I get a phone call, says, "Take your resume out to Bill Cochran, who was the AD for Fox Sports South at the time." They're out at Shea Stadium, or I think it was Citi Field now. They're out at Citi Field, and give me your resume. Nice. So I go out, I meet him, I shake his hand, I give him my resume. He goes, "Okay, nice talking to you. And here's another little step into another luck story." He goes inside, he puts the resume down in the truck, and the graphic operator sees my name, and she said, "Stephen Daly." She's like, "I know him." And he said, tell me about him. And she was my graphic operator for college football for 2 years, Kathy Knauer. And she, of course, gave me a glowing review.
Right.
She's still the road operator for when I go up there with the Braves, which is awesome. It's good to see her. And she said a couple nice things about me, and John Entz saying a couple things about me, and they hired me as a freelance AD.
Nice.
Like literally when she said, I want to move to Atlanta, and I said, not without a job. I'm not leaving the state. Like a month later, I had a job.
Why did you want to go? For a job, or is there family there? Or?
Her family's all here.
Okay.
Her mom's here. Her dad passed away before we met. Her sister and brother are here.
Okay. Makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, it was. It's just like she had this job with Showtime Sports. She knew that she wasn't going anywhere up the ladder, and that's why she's like, I might as well change now. And for me, it was good because I became an AD right away. Like there was no transition from PA to AD.
Right.
I was just the AD.
So you're working at Fox Sports. This is kind of mid-career.
This is 10 years ago.
So 10 years ago, what was that like?
Yeah. It was huge because it was I spent less money to live and I made more money than I ever had.
Okay.
Not like hundreds of thousands of dollars, obviously, but I was making more money than I made in New York, and I was spending about half as much.
Yeah, exactly.
Living with my mother-in-law and living in Atlanta. So it was an interesting experience. I had a producer who I had worked with before on college football, who was my producer down here, and he's well known as an over preparer. He does a lot of elements and a lot of graphics, and like maybe not even an eighth of it gets in, and it's just all this prep work, and everybody's stressed out before the show starts, and then you got to do a show. And it was interesting to work with him and see, because I learned a lot of things of what to do right and a lot of things of what not to do. He prepared. That was one thing I learned about. You got to prepare. You got to be organized. You've got to really know your stuff before you get to a truck. On the flip side, you don't need to have a roll in for every single storyline. You don't need to have a graphic for every single storyline. Some of it can just be talked about. So it's a lot of things I learned in that time from him, because we did a lot of college basketball together. We did a lot of Braves baseball together. And at that point in my career, I was starting to realize I wanted to direct. I had no desire to produce. I knew at that point that I wanted to direct games. There's something about, like, I worked studio shows a lot, and even now, I've worked so much studio, but when I look back on it, I would much rather do a game, because there's first pitch, or there's the basketball tip, or the puck drop, or the whistle, or the opening kickoff, and then all you do is react. And if you react the right way, you make the right coverage of the game. It's not about creating your own narrative. You can have things to steer the show. Absolutely. If it's a blowout, you got to have something to talk about. Boy, all that preparation really comes in handy. Mm-hmm. But if it's a one-run game, it's 2-1 in the 8th inning, I don't care about a story about some guy's cleats. I don't care. As a fan, I don't care. And that was the thing that I had to translate. Like I told you before, growing up, I wasn't this crazy sports fan. I still watched sports, but I wasn't paying attention to announcers when I was a kid. And as an adult, I started listening more and more, and I'm like, what do I care about that this guy plays the saxophone in high school? Like, that's like, there's some things I care about personally, some things I don't. And the idea behind covering a game became this obsession for me. I love doing it. And I was doing it full bore for Fox. That's all I did. I didn't have anything to do with any studio shows. And then
so you prefer the truck to the studio?
110%.
Okay.
Beyond any measure of any doubt. I would much rather be in a truck doing a live game than doing studio shows.
Right, and you prefer directing to producing?
Yeah. The Fox at the time asked me to produce I was their freelance AD, and then I became their permanent staff AD, and they had me produce 8 or 9 women's college hoops games, which again, Shawn, when I'm given an assignment, I do it, and I do it to the best of my ability.
Right.
And they were all very happy with what I did. The announcers were happy. Everybody thought it was great. They also set me up with very good directors who wouldn't let me fail. And at the end of it, they're like, "What'd you think?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it went well." And they said, "Great, we would like you to do more." I'm like, "That's funny because I don't want to do any more because I don't like producing." They're like, "Oh, but you're so good at it." I said, "I'm really good at digging ditches. You don't see me doing it every day."
Yeah.
I didn't like it, and I wanted to direct. And the next thing out of the coordinating producer's mouth was, "Well, we don't have staff directors here, so I don't know what you're going to do." I said, "So what's the point in me being here then, right?" And he said, "I guess." And at the time, that coordinating producer and I, he was my main report. So he had all the power over me where I went, what I did, except for Braves. When I did Braves, I was under a different CP.
Right.
But the executive producer, Hammond Reynolds, and I had a really strong relationship. So I went to him with a concern. I said, why am I here if I want to be a director and you're telling me I can't be a director? And he kind of shed a little better light on it, that it's not you can't be a director. You can just go freelance and be a director, but you'll be, you'll be starting out, with all this competition. You won't have a staff job to protect you.
Right.
So I decided to, at the same time, Graylin and I were planning a family, and I decided to take a job with NBATV.
I remember that. I remember sitting in the room with you. Dude, those are some great times. I'm telling you right now. Like
we laughed a lot.
We laughed a lot. I've worked with a lot of ADs and directors, and we laughed our ass off. That was a fun time.
We laughed. It was good.
It was good. But no, there was something about. I just want to mention something since we're at the NBA TV phase. Like there was something about you. And I don't know if you did this at all your jobs, but you kind of stuck up for the little guy, and you kind of, so many people at jobs were just like, "Oh, I'm not going to say anything because I want to keep my job." And you were like, "Hey, listen, this is a 30-minute show. We have 80 minutes worth of stuff." Or if somebody was yelling at somebody, or if you spoke up. Not many people speak up. And I thought that was very cool.
I learned at a very young age, there's a way to calm a storm without sounding like an asshole.
Right.
Am I allowed to swear on this thing?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so I can be an asshole. There were times when I needed to be an asshole. There are times when I didn't need to be an asshole. But there are the most important times where I saw that a lot from my MSG Network days. I was just a PA. I'd sitting on the wall, and I would see interactions, and I would look how defeated a PA looked, or I would look how defeated an EVS operator looked if they just got rip-roared by a producer or a director.
It was kind of the norm back in the day. It was kind of the norm for people to scream at each other.
That is exactly
And people wouldn't
correct.
do anything about it. Just sort of take it and move on.
Right. And there's people who could process it and just move forward, and there are people that could not process it. And I got a little bit of that as a PA, graphic PA, when I was with the Rangers. Like I said, he's very intense inside the truck. I made it very personal on my end. That's a lot of problems that I have. I can't let go of stuff. I constantly think of things, and what that kind of morphed into was I would always be sticking up for my operators.
Okay.
My operators were very important to me. If my operators were happy, it started when I was a PA as a graphic PA. If I had a happy operator, I had a better show because they just kicked ass and they paid attention.
Right.
If the operator was ticked off from the word go, we'd make mistakes, and I hate making mistakes. And so it started when I was very young. I'm in my mid-20s, and there's full-blown adult people with children operating these machines for me who have real-life problems, who have to worry about cars and insurance and mortgages. And
right.
I remember one story, an operator told me that a teacher told his 6-year-old that Santa Claus wasn't real. And I'll never forget that. And I'll tell you why, because I lost that operator the entire day because he found out that news when he walked in the door.
Right,
and
he just wasn't on his game.
He wasn't on his game.
Off.
He was so mad that someone else took that. And of course, as a 20-something-year-old, I'm like, what's the big deal? I found out. I remember being annoyed, but and I lost him. And for that entire time, I was like, hey Tommy, are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine. Let's just go. Let's just go. And he thanked me later. He's like, I really appreciate you being, observant to what was going on and not just, blowing it off. Yeah, sure, no problem. Whatever. But it's something that started then. I had a lot of opportunities really to be in, and the other thing was, I learned it from ADing shows with producers who wanted a million things, and I would look at the EVS operators just sweating, just piecing stuff together, trying to churn out these 25 things that he wants for one show, and then we line them all the way up on this column, and I look at my sheet at the end of the show, and we checked off one of them that we aired.
Right.
And all of that work and all of that stress, and all I could do to the operator to say, let's just get it done, man, you and me. And I never leave. Like, people will be like, why don't we go to lunch? I'm like, I'm not leaving and hey, he can stay here and build. Well, then I stay here with him. Like, it just didn't seem right to me to walk
dump
out
all this work, right?
So when I got to NBATV and you and I are in an edit room, and Rodney Triplett would walk in and say, here's my list, and it's 5 things. I'm like, okay. And then he'd walk in 6 more times, and by the end, the list would be 38 things. And I'm like, man, if you just got this to me an hour before the edit, we'd be in way better shape right now. But everything's being piecemealed and thrown together. And I remember, like you and I had a good relationship. There were other operators who were just like, I knew when I walk in, I'm like, they knew what they were doing, just like you. They'd know what they were doing. I didn't have to say, no, don't put that, thing there.
Right.
But you'd have an operator that every now and again, doesn't normally do the show. And now I have to tell them how to do a simple player B-roll. But I can't lose my grip. I can't stress. I can't make you feel uncomfortable, because then I might lose you.
Right.
And I don't want to lose you. And I think that's something that, as a director, now I see it. Now I got a chance to direct a lot of Braves Live and Hawks Live, and I got a chance to do some college basketball this year, soccer and volleyball, and
let me just ask you: are they different in any way? Is it like more stressful to do basketball, higher pace to do soccer? Is everything the same? Does it all blend, or is there any difference in sports?
It's not a really difference in sports. It's a difference in storyline of the game. What's happening in the game? All the basketball games I had this year were absolute blowouts. I mean, 15-point blowouts.
Yeah, the Hawks weren't that great. Yeah.
And I did college hoops, but all the Hawks live games, it would all depend on the crowd, and because I was just doing pregame and postgame for those shows, and it really, for the game coverage, for me, when I'm covering a game, it's the storyline of the game, what's happening in the game. Is the coach a guy who's firing off? And a lot of times I was doing a volleyball game, and the color announcer sits me down and she says, this guy right here, I have my headshot sheet of everybody. She said, this guy here, he does the signals to the server. I want to see that. Great. Good. Now I can position my camera over here. Now I can do it. And she was on talkback with me a lot. She'd be like, check out coach here, check out this here, check out this here. And it actually helped my directing of the show, because I got volleyball. I know I get it. I get volleyball. Ball goes over the net, hits the ground. That's a point. When they high five, whatever. The points are very quick. I get all of that. It was the storyline. It was, this coach was super intense. There was a rookie from Spain on the team, and he was really like all of his stock was in this, and you could see the stress on his face because he started her for the first time. That's, to me, what makes such a great. That's what was so entertaining for me.
Right.
So it doesn't really what makes it hard is when you have a 25-point blowout on a college basketball game and there's no fans in the stands.
Wow.
That's tough because you're just cutting players' faces until the ball comes in. And then when you get to the end of the show and the producer says, we got to fill 6 minutes, and, sometimes you're like, 6 minutes, no big deal. But you're like, they just lost by 20. We're going to fill for 6 minutes. Like that's an eternity. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So really the complication of it, the speed of the game isn't the hurdle. The hurdle is the storyline. If it's a storyline where the game is tight and the faces are great and the fans are into it, then it's easy. It's almost easy, but
and is there, like, with editing, there's a flow, like you can't explain it, but it's like music and cuts and you just tell, okay, this has a good flow. Like, is that the same way in a game? Like, you just have a flow, you get with the right crew and you're work together a long time, you just have a flow.
Absolutely. I was directing a high school basketball day in Indiana for Fox Sports Midwest this year. And I did 4 basketball games. And the first basketball game was a matchup between whatever the 2 teams were, but one of the teams, we were in their home court. So the stands were full of fans from one of the teams, and their student section was full, and their students had this like chant they did after every big bucket, and the home team was on the underdog.
Okay.
So the first half, they kind of getting blown out a little bit. Second half, they make this comeback. They're making it tight. And every bucket, this student section is going nuts. So they come down the court, and there's an and one, and the place goes nuts. And my right side handheld, right away flips around to this student section, and all of them look right at the camera, and they start mugging the camera. And I was like, and I rotate because it's four games, so I rotated all the camera guys. So I don't know who was on the camera at that time. They were all 1, 2, 3, 4. So I say to camera 4, I'm like, that's our money shot. When they go crazy, you just go. Don't wait for me. And we got in this rhythm every time. Turnover, bucket. He would just turn. I would do my hero from the slash. Boom, cut the fans every single time. And at one point, the TD's like, I think you've cut these fans in 6 straight points. And I'm like, are you mad? He's like, absolutely not. It was just this huge ball of energy inside this arena. And we got into, just like what you say, Shawn, we got into this rhythm. They're coming down because the players get into it too. Right. Have you ever watched a game and you're like, your team's up and you're like, holy crap, we're going to lose this game? Because you can just see the tide start to turn.
Yeah.
You can see.
There's totally a rhythm, ups and downs in the games for sure.
Absolutely.
There's they call it momentum.
Exactly. The momentum. When the momentum shifts, your ability of coverage needs to shift with it constantly. Right. And I just hit my headset. I'm talking with my hands so much. Okay. I'm Italian. Okay. So there's all this energy, all in rhythm, and it's absolutely magnificent. I had a chance this year when I was directing the studio show for the Hawks pre and post game show. I stayed in the truck and I sat in the front bench because they don't have an AD. And I would put the headset on and I would listen to their director, Gary Lehman. And I have all the cameras in front of me and I'm watching him direct. And man, when the Hawks when it was really close and the Hawks were on a comeback, you didn't even have to open your eyes. You could just tell. He didn't change his cadence. He knew. He would direct I get louder. When it gets better, I get louder. Right. He was very calm, cool, collected the entire time, moving through everything. He'd have his RF cameras, camera 11, and he was walking around getting shots of fans, and he would just interlace that camera, just part of the rhythm. Ready 2, take 2, ready 11, take 11, ready 3, take 3, ready 4, take 4, ready 2, take 2. It was just part of this awesome rhythm that he got into. It was really cool to see. A lot of guys get like that, the really good directors. I mean.
Yeah, so let's go from where we were to inside, if you would.
Sure. Real quick, after NBATV, I went up to the 8th floor, as they called it, TNT, and I was the AD for a year and a half. on the broadcasts, on the basketball broadcasts and baseball broadcasts. It was a lot of fun.
Wait, so that was March Madness and MLB playoffs? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, you can talk about that if you want.
No, I mean, it's pretty straightforward.
Okay.
Everybody, when you move to Turner, when you move to Atlanta and you're in sports television, everybody talks about Turner. So I got told if I ever want to be a game director, I had to become a studio director first. If I want to become a studio director, I had to come and AD the studio show. ADing inside the NBA is the greatest job in television. The coordinating AD doesn't do any of the edits. No offense, Sean. I couldn't stand sitting in edits, just cutting stuff that never made it. So I didn't have to do any edits. I would help do the rundown. I would get all the times from the tape AD. I didn't even have to get the times. And then you just count back from 10 and keep track of the time. I mean, Inside didn't even care about time. It was the producer. It was always like, the producer was always the one doing all the math for the time. I would try to help. And they're like, no, I got it. All right. Because this is what I did for NBA. Oh, it's okay. I got it. Okay. And I would just sit there. And it was awesome. I think I laughed more at that show. That I didn't really watch Inside the NBA very much before I got to NBA TV. But I laughed, and we did some crazy things on that show, as everybody knows, and we went to some really cool places. I honestly could say it was empowering at the same time as you're kind of in awe every time you're talking to these guys. Having a suggestion, need something. And, as the AD, I never talked to them. The only time I ever talked to them is when I would walk down to the bar of a hotel and Chuck was there. And Chuck would recognize my face from walking through the building and say, come on over and have a drink. And he was with 52 people. And you would sit at the end of the bar and you would hear him talking and everybody laughing. And then I'll tab out and he goes, oh, no, Chuck got it. And Chuck paid for everybody's beer. He is the genuine article. I'll start with my Chuck stuff first. He is the absolute genuine article. I mean, I know it's hard because you hear what he says on TV and on the radio, and he's very opinionated, and I believe he truly is opinionated. But the few interactions that I've had with him, and it's few one-on-one interactions with him, he's just a genuine human being.
Good guy.
He really is. He's a kid from Leeds, Alabama. That's what he is. He's a good dude. I've never paid for a thing when he's around. We were in Vegas doing that. What's that? The Electronics Expo show or whatever.
Yeah, E3 or
I can't remember. No, it's not E3. Whatever it is in Vegas,
NAB
it's the no, it's not NAB. We had to do it inside show. We did an E-League from there. So anyway, and he saw a group of us. He's like, "Oh, come on over," and he hands us all chips. He's like, "Go play," and it was like $200 for the chips.
That's nice.
Each. And it's one thing, and the thing is, Sean, you could say, oh, that's cool. I wish I had this kind of money to hand out. He does it a lot more than just that, He's a good man. He takes care of a lot of people. Yes, it's Charles Barkley, and everybody kisses his ass, and everybody, treats him like royalty because, quite frankly, he is in the NBA,
He really is,
And he's easy to mess around with on air, and he's fun to mess around with on air, and he gives great reactions, and you catch him doing some crazy stuff, and it's funny. But he's the genuine article.
Yeah, and I saw Chuck and Shaq when they were doing little skits in the rooms, the green rooms or whatever, and they just kind of looked at me and nodded. Or I didn't really have conversations with them, but one day I was like, I saw Ernie in the cafeteria, and I had talked to him a couple of times. He's very approachable, and I was like, Ernie, I did this documentary on your life and everything you've done for Georgia University, and I just want to say it was great. It was very inspiring. And he was like, "Oh, great, come here, man. Let me buy you lunch." And I was like, "No, you don't have to do that." And he's like, "No, come here, let me buy you lunch." And he bought me lunch, and I was like, geez, man, what a great guy. I mean, with all the stuff that he's been through. Like cancer and everything, and his kids, and he's borderline angelic.
like if there's a higher rank than being royalty, it's him. You know how everybody gets, how like you get a bunch of English actors and they all get knighted. Like if there was an equivalent to the being knighted in America, he should have that. Like he should have the Presidential Freedom Award or whatever it is. He and I have had a lot of really good conversations. Majority of the time, it's not even about basketball or shows. It's about life. He's a really, really good dude. It's hard to, it's hard to just flat out, I don't have specific stories about Ernie because when I was the AD and I was learning how to direct, I would work with him on how he would want things shot. And it's not him telling me, which was always kind of the beauty of it for me. It was him asking me, what do I want?
Right, I'd always do that.
And that's, that was like, we had some really tough shows where we were talking about people who died, and we were talking about a kid with cancer or something like that, or something serious. Or I remember the night Donald Trump was elected president, he came over to me after the meeting and he said, I'm going to need 2 minutes. And I said, okay, how do you want to shoot it? He said, I want a single shot of me in the chair. I don't want it to look fancy. I said, you got it. That's it. Because he was never demanding. Like when I say he said that, he would like, what do you think? It was a great show to work on for that reason. They had no qualms with attacking a social issue, which was great to be a part of. I never really interacted with Shaq as the AD ever, really. I'll get to when I started directing. Was the same time the E-League started, and so I was doing E-League and I was doing Inside and I was doing March Madness, and they put me on this social experiment. It was the Inside the NBA social experiment, which also won an Emmy Award. Right. And I was listed as a producer, senior producer, and I worked with Shaq on a day in and day out basis. So I was doing these social media stuff with Ann Lutzenkirchen and her group from the social media department, and they're all a bunch of great people, just great minds and having a lot of fun. And my favorite thing about Shaq was it didn't matter how crazy it was. All you had to do was ask him. And he would do it. And I'm like, hey man, I never did this, but I'm like, I wanted to put this rope. I wanted to hook up this rope from the trusses in the studio and swing him across like a wrecking ball. I don't know if that was the story. There was some reason we were doing it. Oh, we were trying to make him levitate. Okay. We were trying to make him levitate. So we were trying to get him to be able to levitate. And he and I were trying to figure this out about getting him with a rig. And I said, listen, man, I'm going to be straight up with you. I don't want to have this conversation with you without having our prop people here, right? Our scenic people. And he said, why? He's like, I'm like, I understand that, but I don't want to say yes and leave and them tell me no and me have to come back to you and tell you no. He said, all right. So we're sitting there and, the people from the scenic department are looking at me and they're like, we don't have anything that can hold him for that long for what you're talking about. So we had to scrap that idea. But he would, we would do stuff with him. We brought in a bunch of kids and did crafts time with him. No problems. You have to imagine what it's like to be Shaquille O'Neal. He's 7 foot or 8 feet or however tall he is, 7'1" or whatever. He's ginormous. Anywhere he goes, he sticks out. Any car he's in, he sticks out. And he can't go anywhere. Right. He can't do anything. You know what I mean? Without being recognized. So when you're working with him, that immediately steps into your head like, gee, I don't wonder if I can ask him this. And you have to just do it. When I was directing the show, and let's say Chuck wasn't there, and it was just going to be Ernie and Kenny and Shaq. Well, they didn't like it that Shaq was on the left, then Ernie, and then then Kenny, and then Chuck's empty seat. They're like, just have Shaq move to the other side. So I start walking down to tell him, and someone's like, he's not going to like that. And I'm like, okay. He's not going to like having to sit in Chuck's chair. Right. I'm like, awesome. I'll just go tell some 300-pound huge dude that I'm just going to figure it out. Like, that was always a thing.
Right.
You just got to figure it out. So I walk down there and I'm like, hey man, I'm going to have you sit in Chuck's chair today. And he's like, why? And I'm like, I want to do this thing, but let's not tell anybody. It's just you and me. In the middle of the second segment, after the highlights, when you're talking about something, just act like something bumped your leg. And I want you to reach down and pick up this big box of cookies and be like, geez, Chuck, what do you have down here? And then I want you to grab a box of donuts. And then I want you to grab another thing. And he goes, that's awesome. And I'm like, all right, so I'm going to have you over there. Don't mention it. If anybody says, how are you over there at Chuck's chair, just be like, whatever, and then keep going. And then in the second segment of the postgame show, you're going to start bringing all this stuff. And it was great. Yeah. No one knew about it. I mean, someone saw them put boxes of cookies under there, but no one knew why. Kenny was being, Kenny about it. Oh, you got those under there, like before we go there, yeah.
That's awesome.
And then, yeah, so that was kind of fun. And then the next time had to ask him to go do it because once again I had to figure it out. I walked down and I'm like, hey, you're in Chuck's chair today. He goes, why? And I'm like, because I said so. And he's like, oh, okay. Is that how it's going to be? I'm like, well, I don't have anything fun or like, creative for you to do right now unless you want to think of something. And then he had this other idea about what if I pulled out like a bunch of hair product. I'm like, yeah, we'll do that. And then he never did. He forgot about it. But he's fun. A good dude. He's not like, yeah, he was fun. But like, I remember we were at an all-star party, and he saw me and he like reached over and like just shook my hand. He was like, hey, how you doing? Yeah. We're at a party. So there's like 52 people mobbing him and he's walking through and I'm sitting off to the side drinking a Bud Light and I'm looking at him and I'm talking to probably Billy Proctor and DB and all those guys. And he walks over and he shakes everybody's hand. That felt cool. You know what I mean? Like, when you have those moments, I've seen a lot of famous people. I don't meet a lot of famous people, I have one picture with one athlete, and that's Don Mattingly. That's because he's my idol, I don't have this stuff, and it's not because I want it and can't get it. It's because I don't feel like I should be doing that stuff in the position that I'm in. I don't think it's wrong when people snap a picture with someone famous. I'm all for it. But I think in the business that I'm in, the way I look at it, I have to be professional. And if I'm at a party and there's a famous person there, I'm taking a picture. But if I'm at work, I'm not taking a picture with you, dude.
All right. So do you want to talk about what did you do after that? You did E-League and Fox. Do you want to talk?
Well, E-League was during. I'll talk real quick and briefly about E-League. E-League was very entertaining. Not something I'm interested in as a human at home. Like I don't watch esports. I don't play video games.
I don't either. Yeah.
So it was definitely an opening to another world for me. It was an interesting experience. I'll say to the best, it was an interesting experience.
So you're at Fox now, and you talked a little bit. You're doing a lot of live games, and you're directing. Yeah. Studio stuff, not on the road.
I direct a lot of studio shows, and I AD a lot of road
so you're
games
doing
right
both.
now. I'm mixing. This is exact. In the last year, this is what I've done. I produced high school basketball games because I had absolutely no work at the time. I've directed studio shows, Braves Live and Hawks Live. I've AD'd Braves games. I've directed college basketball. I've directed volleyball, college volleyball, and I've also started to TD.
And you're Fox staff or you're Fox freelance?
No, I'm free. I'm full board freelance. I'm not going to be a staffer. They had an opening for a director position at Fox for the studio director. And I had some very candid conversations with the leaders there who all of them I know. And I just told them I don't think this is for me, and they agreed.
So let me just ask you, let's just wrap up with advice you have for people that are getting into the TV industry, and what's your advice after doing it for 20 plus years?
Don't make any plans. That's my first, and I'm serious about that. Don't make plans.
Sports or just
in television, don't make plans your first couple years. Just chalk it up. Listen, these first couple years, I'm just going to work my ass off. Hey, it's spring break and all my buddies, my first year out of college, and all my buddies are going to Fort Lauderdale, whatever. And you know what? I just got a phone call to be a runner for the local high school band competition on WSB.
Right.
Go do it. Expose yourself to as much stuff as you can, because when you're 40 years old like me and you're directing and winning Emmys of the best show of its kind inside the NBA, you're going to have a realization that this isn't what I want to do. And because of all of my experiences up until that point, you know, when I got to Turner, I got told more or less, this is what you need to do. This is what you need to do. This is what you need to do. And I'm like, but that's not what I want to do. Now, there's a difference between when you're very, very young, you got to do whatever they want you to do.
Just starting out,
professionally. Yeah. They want you to make copies. They want you to get coffee with creamer and sugar in it. Just do it. Don't just do it. Because I promise you it'll turn into something.
I got to just tell you, though, it's admirable. And I'm 52. I just turned 52. So it's admirable that you know the difference of what you want to do and what you don't want to do, and that you're actually doing that. You know what I mean? Because a lot of people are like, I got to just do what the boss says, you know? And I've only learned that lately, probably in the last 5 years, 10 years. Like, wait a minute. I'm not just going to work as much as, 500 hours in a week because you say I should. Like, at some point there's a limit, and I have to make the limit myself.
Yeah. I can't stress that enough. Now, there's a time, I would say the first 5 to 10 years of your career, where you're going to be in this mix of, you got to do what they're asking you to do. I at one point had a president of a local network asked me to take his tuxedo shoes to the cobbler, which was 7 blocks away in Manhattan, so they could be dropped off because the traffic was too heavy. He couldn't make it.
Right.
Now, I was working the day in the office, so okay. And then, of course, I leave, and I'm getting 3 phone calls a minute. Where are you? We need you in the tape library. And I'm like, sorry, Mike. The head of the studio just sent me to drop off his tuxedo shoes at the cobbler, which I didn't even believe they were actually cobblers anymore. Right? I didn't even know what a cobbler is. I thought that was a dessert weight, Yeah. Yeah, right? I was about to, anyway. So in the first 5 to 10 years, you've got to kind of just take it as it goes. And I'm not talking about, someone abusing you. That's not what I'm talking about. When someone says, hey, no. Don't if someone says, hey, I've got this runner gig for you, like this is what happened to me. I got hired for a 2-week job by a friend of an assistant at MSG Network. She said, hey, they need a runner. It's in Rutherford, New Jersey. It's right by your house. They didn't tell me what it was. They didn't tell me who it was for. Can you meet them over at Continental Airlines Arena? Sure. It was a runner for the NBA Finals for NBC. Jesus. And all I did was I'd run to Starbucks, I'd get everybody's coffee, I'd come back, and I had a truck at the time, and I had to help them when they were loading in all the furniture. I had this tiny little pickup truck, and I'd put the furniture on the bed, and I'd back it down the big ramp at Continental Airlines Arena because the big trucks couldn't get all the way inside to the floor. I was driving my truck around the floor of the Continental Airlines Arena like an idiot. But all I did was get a turkey sandwich. I can remember the orders. I'm not kidding you. A French bread turkey sandwich with lettuce, tomato, no mayo, no mustard. And I had to have a fresh bottle of water, half of it poured out, and I had to fill the rest of the bottle up with cranberry juice. That's what the director ate and drank during the shows, and that was my job. And I remember telling my dad that, and my mom, and they were like, what? What are you doing? I'm like, I'm building my career, making this guy a turkey sandwich. But that was my job. The producer of the Mets used to like hot tea, but hot water with 2 tea bags on the side and 1 Splenda. The director coffee. I remember all the orders.
So you got it because
that was my job.
You got to pay your dues. But then later in life, it sounds like every single job you've ever gotten was word of mouth. Like you had one resume.
A lot of it.
Almost. It's like you don't even send resumes.
The only job that I got via resume since my internship was MLB Network. No. Was the job at probably NBATV.
Okay. So what would you say about sustaining? Because I know there's burnout, and I know this is a long career. Like you said, don't make plans. Like, you have a family now, you have kids, you have a wife. How do you do it? How do you keep doing it?
When you're established, and that's a big word, you need to really establish yourself. If you're a staffer, you're good to go. It was really nice being at Turner, having 2 kids. I'm telling you, I had my first kid, Emlyn, in 2013. I was with NBATV. I got my time off. I had my second kid. I was at TNT. I got like 6 weeks off because of the paternity thing, and it was, I had my time off. I had my time with my family. The problem for me was, when I was there's 2 perspectives here. When you're a staffer, it's safe. You have insurance. You have a job. You have your paycheck. Everything's fine. And dealing with what we're dealing with right now, that would be awful nice right about now. But I don't have that luxury, because I decided I was never going to take another staff job, because I was going to tell people when I was available. Because I'm established, I got a chance, and I was very fortunate to still have a lot of relationships at Fox Sports South. And I was also, it was fortuitous that I was leaving Turner at the time, because they needed an AD for the Braves. And that opened the door for me to be directing some of their studio shows and learn how to TD some of their studio shows to make extra money. It ended up being my most profitable year last year. 2019 was the most money I've ever made in my career, and I was a director at Turner Sports, and I made more money as a freelance AD director TD last year than I've ever made in my life. And the reason is, and my wife is full on board of this. I'm like, you can't come up to me and say, hey, next week I need you to have Wednesday off. That's not how it works. If you need me to take days off, I need to know months in advance. And so there's two ideas. There's the staff job where you're safe, paycheck, and then there's the freelance where you're in charge. A lot of benefits of freelancing. You get more money in the paycheck. You have complete control of your finances. I've got a Charles Schwab account. I work, all my 401k. I do my own thing. My office is here in my house. And the biggest thing for me is, right before I left Turner, I was getting burned out because I would only do a show or 2 a week, but I'd have to be there every day.
Yes.
I'd do a show on Wednesday, but I'd have to be back in on Thursday and do another show, and then I'd have to be in on Friday for meetings. And then you'd get Saturday, Sunday off, and I'd have to be back in on Monday morning for meetings, and then a show on Tuesday, meetings all day Wednesday, and a show on Thursday, and then meetings all day Friday. And it's not meetings like 1 or 2, it was like 5. And they were stressful because you would get to a point, and it's like that everywhere. I'm not picking on Turner. It's like that every place that I've been staffed. Meetings, you're sitting in a room, you're all staring at each other, and there's 5 things that you got to get done, and you make a decision on 1, and the other 4 you say, we'll table for another time. And everyone who needs to answer that question is in the room, but you're going to table it for another time.
Yeah.
That's everywhere in every business, everywhere. And it burned.
You have worked a ton of hours. A ton of hours in your career, for sure.
Now, for me, doing the show, even if it's a studio show at this point, I know I said I don't want to do studio shows, and that was always a thing for Fox too. They're like, why aren't you applying for the studio job? And I'm like, because that's not what I want to do. I want to do games, but you do it for us now. I'm like, you're right, I do. I also make money by doing it. Like, I'm not cheap. My combo rate, I direct NTD at the same time, is very, very good. So I'm not going to pass that up. But anyway, the idea of the freelance idea is you can channel more of what you want to do. And for me, it's changing my view. Doing a game, doing a college game, directing a studio show, ADing a baseball game. I've done stats for baseball sometimes. This kind of stuff, being able to change, this is personal, Shawn. I have to change it up.
I'm the same way. Like, once I get into a monotonous schedule. We're doing the same thing every day. After 6 months, I got to change. I just have to.
I lose my mind. It's absolutely like right now with COVID-19, my grass is the best it's ever looked ever.
You got a beautiful lawn,
because I got to get up and I got to do something different. My lawn looks great. My garage is clean. My house is clean. I just cleaned my office today before this because I thought I was going to be on TV. Not TV. I thought this is I even wore my tuxedo shirt for you. That was for you. But I cleaned everything up, and my wife's like, man, I can't stop. I've got to do something. I have to. You have to keep do working.
Stuff. So you like to work a lot, but you also like variety, which is good. Yeah. All right, Steve. I totally appreciate this. This has been very insightful.
Yeah.
Great conversation for me, but I'm sure the listeners will love it because a lot of people want to get into sports, and you've done it all, man. You really have. You've done a lot of different things. So thanks so much.
It's fun.
Thanks for listening to the Lights Camera Pro podcast, where entertainment pros talk about how they made their dream into a career.
Thanks for listening, and subscribe to our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pages. Thanks to Bob Juergens for the Rockin' VO and Joseph McDade for the music. Tune in next week where I have a conversation with John Viner, who's a voice actor, writer for Family Guy, Cleveland Show, American Dad, the new Amy Poehler show called Duncanville. He's got a lot of stories and tells us what it's like to be in the writer's room and how to get your joke into a show. That's next week. See you then.